Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone, and welcome to the 21st episode of the Rolling Stone. This is where I give my initial thoughts and reactions to stories and events that are currently making their way through the news cycle, and our very first one is a wild one. In case you didn't know, a psychiatrist has said that Donald Trump, the sitting president of the United States, might be responsible for more deaths than Mao, Stalin, and Hitler, three of the greatest tyrants of the 20th century. So, the psychiatrist in question is Dr. Francis Allen. He is the former chairman of the psychiatry department at Duke University. And he and a few others, they were on CNN with Brian Stelter this past week. And in the course of their discussion, they were talking about whether it harms the mentally handicapped and the mentally ill when people say that public leaders, public officials are crazy, insane, mentally handicapped, etc., etc. So Dr. Allen said this, quote, "I think medicalizing politics has three very dire consequences. The first is that it stigmatizes the mentally ill. I've known thousands of patients. Almost all of them are well-behaved, well-mannered, good people. Trump is none of these. Lumping that is a terrible insult to the mentally ill, and they have enough problems and stigma as it is. Second, calling Trump crazy hides the fact that we're crazy for having elected him, and even crazier for allowing his crazy policies to persist. Trump is as destructive a person in this century as Hitler, Stalin, Mao in the last century. He may be responsible for more million deaths than they were." Now, to put this all in context, okay, Mao Zedong, who was the communist leader of China, he initiated communist rule in China, which is active to this day. He was responsible, okay, he and his regime were responsible for the deaths of 45 million Chinese, okay? He killed 45 million Chinese men, women, and children during his regime. Joseph Stalin, he is responsible for approximately 20 million deaths, okay, in the Soviet Empire, particularly through his terror famines, but also through his purges, okay, because being a communist leader, he purged all different classes of people, lawyers, doctors, the military, engineers, etc., etc. And Hitler, even though Hitler, ironically enough, he is remembered as the dictator coup d'etat, right? He's seen as the ultimate dictator, like all dictators are aspiring to be like Hitler. He was the baby in this group. He killed 11 million people, peanuts compared to Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong. But anyway, Dr. Francis Allen said, without opposition, without any sort of qualms or anything, that the sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump, he may be responsible for more deaths than Mao, Stalin, and Hitler, right? Not just that he's responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths or even a million deaths, but he's responsible for more deaths than those dictators, which, if we do the math really, really quickly, comes out to 76 million people, okay? Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, whether you agree with him or not, he has not killed 76 million people, okay? He just hasn't. There are no terror famines, there are no concentration camps, there is nothing equivalent to what any of these dictators created or implemented during their regimes in order to hold power, in order to push their ideology and their rule onto their own people, okay? Now, a lot of people, they might see this statement by Dr. Francis Allen, they might see it as just another example of the bias of the media, why the media is corrupted, why the media, can't be trusted, why the media might even be, to use a popular phrase, the enemy of the people. But I think that the issue here is even deeper than that, okay? And this is the question that a story like this raises in my mind. How far is free speech going to go? And that's not even really the question. How far is speech going to go? Because I'm pretty much a free speech absolutist. I think that you should be able to say, pretty much anything. No bars down. I think that there are things that shouldn't be said. I think that people should be able to rein themselves in. And again, if they don't rein themselves in, then another power will rein them in. That's another topic altogether that goes into Edmund Burke territory, which is a very good territory to go into, but that's not what we're talking about here in this episode, in this story. Okay? But that's the question that this story raises. How far will speech actually go? What are its parameters? Again, Dr. Allen, he made these claims without any sort of facts or figures to back them up. Not only that, nobody at CNN actually challenged him on that. Brian Stelter, who was the CNN commentator in charge of this little powwow, he is claiming on Twitter that the reason why he didn't challenge Allen when he made this claim, why, he didn't stop him, why he didn't say, that's bogus, you're full of it, is because of quote-unquote technical difficulties. He didn't hear it. But as far as I've been able to see on Twitter and the rest, CNN has actually not really distanced itself from Allen. They haven't condemned what Allen said. They haven't said, this is bogus, this is baloney, don't believe it, guys. No. They haven't really said anything. They've just been kind of like backing away from it. They've been excusing it. That's what they've been doing. They've been excusing it without condemning it, without backing away from it, which means that they themselves hold this position. They want that to become the narrative, right? So, when you have that, when you have an environment where people can say these outrageous things with no evidence and there is no pushback, the question is, how far is speech going to go? Because remember, the good third law of thermodynamics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, right? So, someone on the left, like Dr. Francis Allen, he makes this outrageous claim, right? He doesn't get pushed back on it. Someone on the right is, righteously and rightfully so, disappointed by it and enraged by it. So he goes out, his reaction to that is to say something even more outrageous. The left sees that as evidence for everything that they've been saying about the right. So they say something even more outrageous. They propose even more outrageous policies, right? And then in retaliation for that, the right says something even more outrageous. The left says something more outrageous. And basically what we're getting into is a situation where we're basically playing ping pong ball with each other, the right and the left, except each time the ball is hit, the force of it grows until pretty much the ball has been disintegrated and you're then beating each other to death with your paddles. Now that's a kind of a weird analogy, but that's really kind of where we are today, because when no one is going to rein themselves in, and if every action has an equal and opposite reaction, that is the cycle that not only is happening right now, but that's the cycle that is going to continue and that is going to get worse. And so that's the first thing, this idea that, this fact actually, that things that if people don't actually, rein in their speech themselves, if they don't recognize that speech is for communication and that communication is for us to find ultimately the truth together, right? But if speech is implicitly allowed, if it's okay to corrupt speech just with lies, misinformation, this is what we are going to sow. A situation where basically the most outrageous thing that you can say is the one that is going to win the day. Because that's what this shows as well, right? Because we're already in the cycle of action and reaction. So now, if you've noticed, the way to get attention is to say something completely outrageous. Don't apologize for it. Don't back away from it. Maybe kind of, sort of, but never really adequately say it. Again, you don't have to do that, because the way to get attention, these days is to say the most outrageous thing possible and then to twist it, turn it to your advantage, however that may be. And this story shows something else as well. It shows that the press isn't really free. Again, we've known this for a while, and I think I've made this point here before. But if you are so ingrained in an ideology where you do not push back on an outrageous claim like Dr. Francis Allen made, you're not a free press, because you are so entrenched in your ideology that you can't even see facts anymore. You can't report objectively anymore. And that leads to something else, and we're already starting to see this, because if regular people can't trust the press, if they don't trust the press, then what that means is that they are going to go to other sources. Those sources might be legit. It might be the Federalist, it might be the Daily Wire, might be the Daily Signal, etc., etc. But other people are going to go to sources that are not reliable, that are not good, right? They're going to go to white supremacist sources. They're going to go, to white nationalist sources, or they're going to go to some other ideology that might not be on the left, but like all ideologies, they are corruptive and corrosive. And then they are going to believe the lies that they say, because they're different lies from what the media is pushing. And since the media can't be trusted, they're going to think that these lies are true. And basically, when that happens, when we're all again broken down into these little camps, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth, then society falls apart at the seams. And it falls apart at the seams because people were not good enough. They were not objective enough. They were not honest enough to actually rein in their speech. And they couldn't just leave it as, I dislike this president, I disagree with this president. No, they had to say he's killed more people than Mao, Stalin, and Hitler. Something that is grossly, objectively false. A blind man would be able to see that it is false. But anyway, that is story number one. Story number two, Maiya Copa, breaking a rule here. It actually happened back in June, but I actually did not see it. It slipped under my radar until I saw it tweeted out on Twitter, okay? But I just had to comment about it because it just captures so perfectly the state of our society. It's kind of funny, and at the same time, it is gross beyond all get out, and it is highly disturbing. So, okay, Snatch Adams. If you've never heard of her, don't look her up, okay? You are very blessed. And honestly, in the grand scheme of things, she's not of cultural importance, like, for example, Miley Cyrus or Taylor Swift, or even right now Megan Rapinoe, right? She does not have the social influence and the social power that those three examples that I just gave have. However, Snatch Adams, she is an extreme burlesque performer, okay? And make of that what you will. Now, okay, back in June, she actually had people smoke weed from a bong that was placed up her butt. I wish I was making this up, gang. I really wish. I mean, if nothing else, this story should demonstrate that fact is stranger than fiction. So, thank you, universe, thank you, God, for showing that rule, for proving that rule again, because otherwise I might not have believed it, okay? Now, the reason why she was allowing people to do this is because she wanted to fight the patriarchy, okay? Again, I told you, I swear I am not making this up, okay? Now, she decided to do this because she wanted to one-up her quote-unquote art project from 2018, where she actually lay in a coffin for 2.5 hours with mealworms crawling up and down her body. Now, why any sane person would actually want to lay in a coffin or in a casket for 2.5 hours? Again, I've worked in the funeral industry for 4 years. I know what caskets are like, okay? A normal person does not want to lay in one for 2.5 hours, okay? Now, she said in an interview, okay, talking about this stunt for 2019, smoking weed from a bong up her butt. She said this, quote, "The crowd would have been happy with that as a performance, just being, tied up naked on stage with her legs spread up and out, okay? I'm not going to show you pictures, okay, guys? You don't need to have that seared in your memory, okay?" She continued, "But once I was up, Alexis, one of the stagehands, came up and put the plug in. The crowd didn't know what was happening until he filled it with weed and took a hit. A cheer erupted as we invited everyone at the festival to smoke weed out of my butt." Okay. What does this prove? Beyond the fact that, people are seriously disturbed and need to seek professional psychiatric help. Well, the first thing that it shows is that ideology corrupts everything that it touches, okay? A sane person would not want to be trussed up like a pig for hours on end on stage, naked, to cheering audiences. A normal human mind revolts at that sort of idea, at being exhibited like that, right? It's a sign of weakness. If you are trussed up like that naked, historically speaking, that is a sign of defeat. That is a sign of humiliation. Your enemies have vanquished you, and now they are parading you out in this humiliating position to the laughter and jeers of their people, your enemies, okay? There is something very innately grained in us to reject that, right? But if you are infected with ideology, right, where facts don't matter, all that matters is the narrative that the ideology espouses and enforces, then all of those things go out the window, okay? It doesn't matter then, because all that matters is pushing the agenda forward. And if that means putting yourself in that physical position, who the hell cares? So that's the first thing that it shows, right? But now, it also shows something else. It shows the very sickness of our culture. Like I just said, there is something innately ingrained in us so that we don't want to put ourselves in that position. Well, that same sense makes us recoil when we see someone in that position, right? If we don't have a bone in the fight and we see someone like that, our initial reaction is one of pity. It is one of hopelessness. We are embarrassed for the person. We hurt for that person. We feel for that person. We want to help that person. Again, we might not be able to, but those are the feelings that we're going through. Again, if you are an actual normal, semi-functioning human being with just half a grain of soul and half a pint of heart inside of you. But the very fact that this crowd cheered to the skies, not only when they saw her, hanging like this, upside down, with her legs spread up and out, okay, naked on stage. Not only did they cheer when they said that, but the added humiliation of smoking an illicit drug through her butt. They cheered. They thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And if there is not a barometer which shows the sickness of our society today, it is that. The very fact that something so, I'm just going to say it here, gang, something so foul and so vile not only could be thought up, not only could be accepted, but then could be cheered to the skies, says volumes. It says much more than any Pew poll, more than any amount of research could ever do, because that animalistic moment is now trapped in time here, and it stands as a black obelisk to all of us and shows us just exactly where our society is at this point, and it is in the gutter. I'm not going to make any bones about it, okay? But this story shows something else as well, shows one more thing. Okay? Keep in mind that this whole stunt was ostensibly done to fight the patriarchy, right? The evil patriarchy. But here's the question that I would ask Snatch Adams and any number of, the idiots who attended that concert and furthermore, who cheered her for doing this. And the question is this: how exactly is the patriarchy defeated? Or how is the patriarchy even given a punch by this action? Right? Okay? It doesn't. That's the answer. It doesn't. The patriarchy isn't defeated by this. What? Do they really think that the patriarchy, if it existed at all, do they really think that it was going to be defeated because, some millennial girl, did this stunt? Do they really think, what does the patriarchy say? It oppresses women, it oppresses minorities, it suppresses the vote, it, keeps the gender pay gap alive, police brutality, this, and this. What among all of these things, supposedly, that the patriarchy does, what was defeated through this? Nothing. Again, nothing. The only thing that was defeated by this stunt was decency. Okay? And that is a very old-fashioned word, and people don't like it today. But decency is actually what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom, because we're the only animal that really has a sense of decency, that knows when our decency has been attacked. When we have not been decent, we recognize when people are acting indecently. And I'm not just, talking about immorally. I'm saying if they are rude, if they are vulgar, if they are obnoxious, if, they are crude or rude, or illogical or anything like that. We instinctively recognize it, unless, of course, you clamp down on that little voice inside of you. Right? Now, what happens when you get rid of that sense of decency, right? If you say that it doesn't exist, if you squash it like, these people are trying to squash it, well, then there is nothing that really separates us from the rest of the animal. I mean, we have our rationality, but even then, when you see people acting irrationally like this, you can't really make a good argument that humans are innately rational, can you? I mean, that's a pretty big argument just on the face of it, that maybe people aren't rational. And so you've chucked rationality away and you're not acting decently, what else is left? There's really nothing. Men are just human beings, are just animals again, and therefore we don't have to treat them very well at all. Now, that might not seem like a big deal to some people. However, if there is nothing that demands decency from one human person to another human person, then there is no need to respect another person's rights, right? Do people even have rights to begin with? Do people have the rights to liberty? And are people actually equal? All of these questions, right, which stems from our, special status within the animal kingdom, within the hierarchy of the world, of living things in general, and all of those things, that separate, that we say that we have innately, like rights and equality and democracy, etc., 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 all of those things are predicated on the fact that human beings are a special race. But if they're not special, first of all, do those things really exist? And even if they do exist, why should we recognize them? Why should we live like they exist? Again, if people are not going to act like people, right? And if I could say just one more thing about this story, okay? It shows again that people can't really fight. In fact, I'm starting to think very few people actually have the stomach for the fight, right? if people really believed that the patriarchy existed, if they really believed all the things that the patriarchy is supposed to do, would they actually be doing this? Or would they actually be taking their time and energies into actually crafting solutions and a way to defeat the patriarchy? Of course they would. The fact is, though, that either they really don't believe in the patriarchy and they just want an excuse to act like this and then veil it by saying, oh, we're fighting the patriarchy, or they don't really have the fight. They don't really have the guts to fight what they say they believe is the enemy. And so they do this, and then they cloak themselves, internally and externally by saying, oh, we're fighting the patriarchy like this, we're fighting the patriarchy like this, when really they're not, because they're cowards, or because they are uncommitted to the cause, okay? And I'm going to say something here. If these people are supposedly fighting the patriarchy, and if Antifa is supposedly fighting the patriarchy, I have much more respect for the people in Antifa. As brutish, as thuggish, and as much of a terrorist organization as it is, at least they act on the convictions of their beliefs, unlike these people do. But that is story number 2. Story number 3, our final story for this episode of The Stone, actually ties in with our second story, because it has to do with Nikita Dragun. Now again, if you've never heard of Nikita Dragun, you are lucky. Nikita Dragun is a 23-year-old transgender woman, okay? He was born a man, transitioned to a woman, okay? And he is a beauty and cosmetics YouTuber, okay? Who this past week, he attended the MTV VMAs red carpet, right? Nothing really unique about that. But he caused controversy because he arrived with 3 boyfriends, right? All of them tight pants, no shirts, all of them ripped, muscular, etc., because they're gym rats, they live in the gym. But all 3 of them were wearing dog leashes, which had, they all had dog collars, which all had leashes, which he, Nikita Dragun, was holding, okay? And he said on Twitter, quote, hiring one boyfriend didn't exactly work out the first time, so this time I hired 3. Now, regardless to say, there was a lot of pushback on this, okay, in social media. People said that this was disgraceful, whether it was the fact that someone had even thought of putting people on leashes, again, not acting as if people are rational or have human decency, and therefore you can treat them like animals. Snatch Adams, paging Snatch Adams. And some people got, try to be woke about it because one of the male models hired was a black man, saying, oh my gosh, having a black man with a dog leash, not good visuals, Nikita, not good visuals at all. Well, Nikita Dragun responded to all this controversy with another tweet saying, quote, reverse sexism? Sexism is prejudice plus power. Men are the dominant gender with power in society. My VMAs outfit was a statement on me as a woman taking that power. Might I add, with consenting paid male models. Help me understand how I'm sexist towards men. Make it make sense, okay? She also said that she got the idea from Snoop Dogg, who a couple of years ago apparently attended the MTV VMAs with 2 women who were wearing dog collars with leashes. This excuse is bogus, okay? It's bogus. First and foremost, because Nikita Dragun is not a woman, okay? You could technically call her a transgender woman, maybe, perhaps. That translates into he's a man, okay? So, biologically, he is a man, despite of the surgery that he has had, and it is very good surgery, I will not deny it, okay? He has spent money to look like a woman, and on the outside physically, he looks now very much like a woman. very good surgery, okay? We're not talking about Jessica Yaniv here, okay? This is top dollar surgery. But biologically speaking, Nikita Dragun is a man and will always be a man, right? Unless people somehow figure out the alchemical process of transubstantiation, right, outside of Catholic theology, and are actually able to turn one substance, a woman, into another substance, a man, or vice versa. So, based on that biological fact, Nikita Dragun is part of the very patriarchy that he is criticizing and saying that he can't be a part of, right? Because men are the dominant force on the planet, and therefore, you can't have reverse sexism because sexism is power plus prejudice. Well, when you're a biological man, you have just condemned yourself because you have put yourself into that ruling class, okay? Whether you like it or not. Second of all, Nikita Dragun has 1 million followers on Twitter. He has 2.5 million subscribers on YouTube. That today, in this day and age, is a huge amount of social power and influence, okay? So for him to say that he can't be sexist because, he, quote unquote, is a woman and women don't have any power, that is totally bogus in your specific case, because when you have that much social power, do not come whining and do not be saying that you have no power. Okay? That is a huge lie. Plus, it is a disservice to women, in social media circles who have worked hard to build up a following, because what you're saying is that if you are a woman, even if you are a YouTube, whether you're doing political commentary, whether you're doing comedy, whether you're doing movie reviews, or whether you're doing beauty and cosmetics, or whether you're doing history or whatever, but if you actually create something that people want and that people love, and you build a following, you build a brand, and you get 10 million subscribers, and 10 million followers on Twitter, etc., and people listen to you, they recognize you, they hold on to your every word, they watch your videos, they buy your merchandise, they listen to your advice, they read your books, right? You can say something and people will immediately change their way of thinking and follow you to the ends of the earth, okay? Don't you dare tell real women who have worked hard to build that up from nothing that they have no power and that they are socially insignificant. That is sexist in and of itself, okay? And I have a huge problem with that. Now, the third thing wrong, okay, is that sexism is not prejudice plus power. It is just pure prejudice. Pure and simple. Power has absolutely nothing to do with it. And you know why? Because with that equation, well, sexism is only power but plus prejudice. When you do that, then people whom, again, society will deem, because of its wokeness and because of its progressive thinking, say have no power, they will be able to get away with the most sexist behavior that you can imagine. Think of so many rap singers and rap artists. Rap music is not known for treating women with respect, is it? No, it's not. So many of these rappers, again, they've built a brand for themselves. They have social clout. They have cultural power, right? But because so many of them are Black Americans, and because that means, according to the ideology of the day that rules the skies, that they have no power, that means that they can't be sexist towards women, which means that what they're saying, calling women bees and hoes and everything like that, everything that you can think of, worse things than that, that means that they can't be sexist because they have no power. And if you don't have power, then you can't be sexist. So what that means is that it lets a lot of people who actually are being legitimately sexist off the hook when they shouldn't be left off the hook. They shouldn't be let off the hook. They should be called to account for their sexism, especially when the woke, the enlightened are running around, decrying everyone else's sexism. Okay? And there's just the fact, too, that what does power even have to do with it, right? The last time I saw, hate is hate. And whether you're a poor person with no power or whether you're a rich person with all the power in the world, hate is the same. It might manifest itself differently. You might be able to cause more damage with your hate if, you're on the top than on the bottom. But at the end of the day, it's the same kind of hate. Now, okay? And can I just say, again, tying it with the second story, that this shows what happens when we have no, for want of a better word, a religious sentiment. When there is nothing separating a human being from an animal, then there is nothing that actually stops people from treating a human being like an animal, never mind whether they consented to or not. And what that means is that we're not even talking about abortion here. We're talking about any single one of us, right, being picked, chosen by random, by an enemy, just by society as large, as just being another animal who, can be sacrificed for whatever greater good society decides it's fighting for at that time. But that is story number 3, and as usual, I have talked for far too long. So I am going to wrap up this video and say happy Friday, gang. Have a great weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday. Ciao.